The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 183, in which we will be looking at the first 10-minute segment of the third episode of the 2018 Netflix version of Watership Down. But first, I've been thinking back over the last section of episode 2, which we looked at 2 weeks ago, and I don't think the two escapes from Nuthanger and Ephrafa could have happened at the same time in the book, as Holly arrives back on Watership Down just after Hazel is shot, even though at the end of episode 180 I did say these events happen at the same time. I thought I should clarify that. However, in this version of Watership Down, it's important to bear in mind that Ephrafa is a lot closer to Watership Down than in the book, so perhaps here the two simultaneous escapes are plausible. Next, following last week's one-off episode on the search for the beanfield, I've had a very rare, slightly less than pleasant comment on YouTube. Quote, "I know what Watership Down is and all, but I have no idea what your point is or what in the hell you're talking about." End quote. This has served as a salutary reminder of just how superficial awareness of something such as Watership Down can be, as well as the potential hazards of, as I have referred to it, pedantic geekery. In response, I referred the commenter to chapters 9 and 10 of the book, which should explain everything to them. I could comment further, but I'll be nice. Incidentally, while making the video supplement to episode 182, which is now available, I did notice that the third boundary, from the beanfield to the pasture, was actually missing from the 1900s Ordnance Survey map, but had appeared by the 1937 to 1961 version, which does mean that it could have been absent in theory for the first 17 years of Richard Adams' life, including key years when he wandered the local landscape as a child. The mystery deepens a bit. So then, let's get back to Watership Down, where Hazel is missing, presumed shot. Netflix miniseries Episode 3 Part 1 The Fog. Part 1 of Episode 3, The Escape, runs from the start to 9 minutes 25, and the reverse timings are 50 minutes 05 to 40 minutes 40. The equivalent chapters from the book are chapters 26, Fiver Beyond, 28, At the Foot of the Hill, and 29, Return and Departure. We hear Fiver quietly call Hazel's name, and now we see him looking around nervously as he is back in the other world. There is a bright light nearby, otherwise it is dark around him. And now we see two huge mechanical diggers, as we saw at the destruction of Sandalford Warren. Fiver continues to call Hazel's name as the digger buckets loom over him. One of them calmly scoops him up along with a lot of soil. Then it becomes unstable and drops him. He lands in the hands of a huge backlit human male whose face we never see. He carries Fiver in his hands while telling him he has gone beyond again and what a mistake that was. The man is walking calmly along and, from his vantage point, Fiver sees a culvert. The man asks what he thinks of his old warren and says it's not one anymore, at least not for rabbits. Where the culvert was before, we see the two diggers again. Fiver asks the man where Hazel is. He replies that they don't have him. He's in the hole. He tells Fiver to get back to that path and angrily throws him to one side. Terrified, Fiver flies through the air into a twist of bare branches and taut ropes. Landing on a rope, he is abruptly awake. We see the episode titles. And now we see Fiver asleep again in his burrow. At least we think we do. A close-up from the other side shows Woundwort staring at the sleeping rabbit malevolently. It is Heisenthal. Captain Orkis comes running into the burrow demanding to know where she is. Woundwort tells him to calm himself. Orkis says Heisenthal is responsible for the death of his brother. She is responsible for every escape attempt, and it's only a matter of time before she succeeds. So it seems that Orkis and Vervain addressing each other as brother was not just a term of comradeship, and that Vervain, in this version, did indeed die on the Iron Road. Orkis says he wants Heisenthal destroyed. As he moves forward, Woundwort pins him down, saying that death is not the gravest of punishments. He adds that it is Heisenley who inspires the other does. If you break her, you break them all. We are back on Watership Down. A fog has covered the down. Inside the honeycomb, in the first scene in which nearly all the rabbits of the warren on Watership Down are gathered there, Bigwig is questioning the 3 returned rabbits from Ephrafa. Holly uses the phrase, "You can't imagine it until you've been there," rather than saying "unless," as in the book. Why the change? After all, a chapter was named after it. Bigwig stays calm and says they mustn't panic. But Hawkbit isn't buying it. He points out the proximity of Ephrafa, as well as Hazel having been shot. The warren is finished. This begins a general argument that is interrupted by Clover. She suggests a proper search for Hazel. Holly says they cannot go out in this fog. Fiver enters saying he knows where Hazel is, in some kind of hole by the farm. Clover immediately says she is going on her own to look for him if no one else is coming, but Holly gently blocks her way, pointing out that she has only just escaped hutch life. Bigwig says he will go with Clover, but Holly disagrees, leading to Bigwig asking who made him leader. Holly says Bigwig is too impetuous, which is a bit rich coming from the rabbit who decided to go to Ephrafa with no discussion. There follows a moment of comedy as Bigwig gets angry at being called impetuous and demands to know if anyone else thinks that. Cometh the hour, cometh the rabbit. As Bluebell says, he doesn't know what it means, but yes. Bigwig says it means he's hot-headed, which means Bluebell was spot on. Hawkbit interrupts, seemingly to say that if Clover wants to go, then they all should. A general argument breaks out among them all, during which Clover leaves on her own. By the time Bigwig notices, it is too late. We are in the fog, seeing it from Clover's perspective as she runs through the grass. She cries out Hazel's name desperately several times. Eventually she comes to a barbed wire fence where she sees fur trapped on 2 of the barbs. The farm must be near. She continues on. Now we see Bigwig in the fog calling out for Clover. He stops and sniffs the air. Back to Clover. She calls for Hazel again, and, passing under a wooden fence, falls into a ditch. On trying to climb out the other side, she puts up birds, possibly crows, who shock her into falling back into the ditch, as if she is being guided. Running along the ditch, she comes to a culvert. She pauses and exits the ditch as the mist clears for us to see Hazel just out of her sight. Out in the open again, Clover tells herself to think. Faintly, we hear Hazel call her name. She moves towards the sound, arriving at the other end of the culvert, and she finds him. They nuzzle each other, and she starts to clean his wound. They discuss why humans have the black branches that shoot. He says they have them for killing and think that is skillful, where it is actually the opposite. He asks her how she is getting on outside a hutch. She says it is confusing and exhausting, but she feels alive. They nuzzle again as she says she doesn't want to be apart from him again. It is quite the domestic scene, in the middle of an ongoing rescue. Suddenly they hear Bigwig's voice crying out her name. She tells Hazel she will fetch him. As she leaves, Hazel thanks her for not giving up on him. Clover runs through the fog again, calling for Bigwig. Eventually she sees the silhouette of a large rabbit. She goes up to him. It is Sergeant Sainfoin of Ephrafa, and he is not alone. She cries for help. Bigwig, nearby, hears her. Far off in the mist he can hear her struggling, as well as other male voices. He cries out her name in panic and then hears Hazel cry her name. Arriving in the culvert, Hazel asks him what's wrong. Where is Clover? 3 bloody shotgun pellets land on the ground. We are back on Watership Down. Keehar is nursing Hazel back to health in the entrance to his burrow. The other rabbits wince at Hazel's cries of pain as Keehar digs the tip of his beak into his wounds. Bigwig, arriving, complains about the mess Keehar has made of his quarters. Here there is no love lost between Bigwig and Keehar, who calls him Plump Rabbit. Keehar tells Hazel all the Blackstones are out. He should improve after 3 days' rest. But Hazel says there isn't time for rest. Addressing everyone, he says they leave for Ephrafa at daybreak, and they don't come back until Clover, Heisenthal and anyone else who wants to join them is freed. Quietly, to Fiver, he asks how he will convince them to come along. Fiver says they will follow him anywhere, but is he up to this? Hazel replies that when the Afrafans stole the liberty of rabbits from Watership Down, they might not have wanted a war, but that is what they will get. He moves forward to rejoin the other rabbits on Watership Down. Comparison with the book. First of all, let's be very clear that the portrayal of Fiver's vision that leads to the finding of Hazel is far closer to the book here than the famous Bright Eyes sequence from the 1978 film. The only significant difference being that in the book, the malevolent human wakes Fiver up by bashing him over the head after showing him the bloody hole in which the injured Hazel lies. One significant theme of this retelling of Watership Down is that does are no longer just passive receivers of oppression and liberation. And personally, I don't have an issue with that. However, Clover's going out on her own to find Hazel, having just been freed from a hutch, goes a bit too far, and her immediate capture by a closer Efrafa perhaps emphasises this. In the book, it is Fiver and Blackberry who find Hazel together, rather than Clover and Bigwig both finding him separately. So now we have a real departure from the original story, where the mission to Efrafa is not just an attempt to get Doze. It is a rescue mission in which Hazel is largely motivated by being in love. Again. This is far closer to the 1999 to 2001 TV series, where Primrose stands in for Heisenthal, and it is her that Hazel falls for. Overall, I prefer my Hazels to be thinking with their heads rather than their hearts. Hazel's recovery from being shot is heavily truncated, as is usual in retellings of Watership Down, but I did like the way Kehar's extraction of the shotgun pellets was not sanitised, as it is a bit in the 1978 film, as is mentioned in Kat Lester's book on that version of Watership Down. Overall then, this section starts off really close to the book, before veering off, yet again, into its own version of the story, seemingly with a lot of influence from the TV series. Next time, the rabbits of Watership Down journey to Efrafa, as Clover adapts to life there.